Hello and welcome to Mekelle Foresight. This is Mekelle, producer and host of the show. Today we have a guest, Ambassador Fesseha Asgedom. Ambassador Fesseha, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Okay, it's been nearly a month since the cessation of hostilities agreement was signed in Pretoria, South Africa, between the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray leadership. As we speak, many parts of Tigray, in 5 of the 6 zones of the region, the western, northern, northwestern, southern, central, and eastern parts of Tigray remain under occupation by Eritrean and Amhara forces. Forces that 2 years since the outbreak of the war on Tigray continue to inflict mass executions, kidnappings, rape, and other unspeakable atrocities on civilians of these areas. So what has the agreement brought for the people of Tigray practically?
Thank you, Michael. It's a very pertinent question, and many are asking uh, what's happening in Tigray right now. Uh, just simply to put the agreement in perspective, the one most important outcome of this agreement is that the guns has been silenced in Tigray. There are no more uh, bombs coming from the sky, drones, and what have you. And therefore, the cessation of hostilities holding between the warring parties, that of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and the Tigray Defense Forces. In my opinion, is one of the most single outcome of this agreement. Having said this, as you mentioned in your statement, by now, from what I understand in the agreement, and especially following the Nairobi discussions, both the Eritrean army and the Amhara forces should have been out of Tigray, out of Ethiopia by now. Not only they are there in Tigray, but they are also continue their heinous crimes against the population. People under their control are being killed, properties are being looted, there is massive kidnapping of young people whose whereabouts is not yet known, and also humanitarian deliveries, whatever a small amount is getting to Tigray, cannot reach those people that are under the control of the ADF. It is the sole responsibility of the Ethiopian federal government to take the responsibility to eject the Eritreans and the Amhara Fanos and others out of Tigray.
Ambassador, we will come to that briefly. But at what cost, though? Because this agreement seems to be also going beyond cessation of hostilities. There are some political provisions. The agreement that the Tigray leadership signed provides for the dismantlement of the regional government of Tigray and for the disarmament of the Tigray Defense Forces in return for ending the fighting, which you said has now silenced the guns and gave relative respite to the people, receiving humanitarian aid and the removal of foreign and non-ENDF forces, which is still standing.
Well, let us put this into context, as I said earlier. This cessation of hostilities is meant for Tigray people to have a better situation, to run their business, their lives, as opposed to continuation of the war. Michael, you have to understand that the siege has worked in Tigray. The project of the government of Addis Ababa and that of Isaias Afwerki has subjected our people to the level where we are now. Therefore, it is not a matter of choice. If we have to continue to fight, and we have the power and the will to fight, we have no people to save. Our people will be totally exterminated to a level that we cannot imagine. The siege has worked in Tigray. Starvation as a weapon of war has worked. The complete siege of the people have worked. And if we were going to continue without having such an agreement, and yes, TDF can fight, and they have shown to the world what a fighting force we are, but people will be completely destroyed. More than you can imagine, more than what has happened in the last 2 years. And therefore, we chose cessation of hostilities and all those things that come under it to save our people and to see better days based on give and take. Having said this, you're right. The Pretoria Agreement goes all the way from cessation of hostilities to political issues. That is the process that we have to work on. As I said, it was a better option than to continue to fight and subject our people for total extermination, because we know these forces will not stop. They have executed it to the level that the international community has come and said, unless you make some peace with them, we're not here to rescue. We can go about in details about this international community's sympathy or empathy saying we're concerned. But they know that genocide has been committed in Tigray and they're not willing to stop it. And therefore, whatever shortcomings that we have in the agreement, I sincerely believe that's a better option for our people to see, to work with the other party that is also exhausted in fighting. The situation of the country demands that we sit on a table and chart a better future. And yet, in the short term, the federal government has the responsibility to do its share according to the agreement. It has to see to it that the Eritreans are out of Tigray, that the forces
that brings me, Ambassador, to what one commentator said. He called the Tigray leadership's signing of the agreement as a grand departure from the past, saying that the Tigray's ruling party is, in the words of the commentator, finally playing high-stakes realpolitik after nearly 30 years of principled and ideologically rigid politics. And he goes on to say that this is how societies survive extermination, by bigger, wealthier, and majoritarian enemy states. Does the agreement signal a shift to more pragmatism on the part of the Tigray leadership, based not on principles, but strictly on interests?
Well, I'm not going to go to the semantics of political words like pragmatism and lack of principle. What I can tell you, Michael, is our people are at the verge of extermination more than what has happened in the last 2 years. And if the leadership in Tigray was going to let go other principles, which I don't think is any more values than saving millions of Tigrayans from being extinct. We know that. We know that's going to happen. The enemy is determined to do that. I think any principle or any goal is less than the people themselves. We are fighting. We did this for 2 years to save the people. And if you can fight as an army and yet the majority of the people are going to be in concentration camps, and they're going to be dying at a mass scale due to lack of food and medicine. As it is, we have lost a lot of lives. Some say to the level of 800,000 and what have you. Yes, the leadership have said, let us first save our people and work within the constitution. It may not be the best agreement that you can have, but it's better than to allow our people to continue to be exterminated.
In an official statement issued a few days after the signing of the Pretoria Agreement, the government of Tigray stated that it and not the TPLF was represented at the peace negotiations in the delegation of Tigray in South Africa, and that it is the government that signed the cessation of hostilities agreement. Isn't that by claiming the signatory of this agreement that the government of Tigray is owning a legal document that has many flaws, including on the self-determination of the people of Tigray? For instance, the right of the people to be represented by the leaders that it elects.
Well, first of all, I'm not saying it is a perfect agreement. Yes, there are issues that has to be looked into. The agreement has a clause. The government of Tigray is asking for an amendment for reconsideration. In Pretoria, the main target was to stop the war, to come to some kind of agreement and save our people from what I told you earlier. When you put your target as cessation of hostilities, and the other party comes with all kind of things that will jeopardize the silencing of the guns, you signed the agreement and you work towards its amendment, to its improvement, when there is some level of confidence building measures taken by both parties. For example, the government of Tigray was invited by the African Union as government, as a regional government, sent its delegation. And the government of Tigray sent its delegation with the mandate of the Tigray regional government. And yet, the federal government objected to negotiating with the government of Tigray, but it wanted to negotiate with a party that it classified it as a terrorist. This is contradictory in terms, but if your main goal is, this is secondary now, we can sort it out in the process. So long as you don't assign someone to administer Tigray, so long as there is some kind of process where the people will own their self-administration, either you ask for amendment later on, or you go through it. Compared to what we all come out from Pretoria, to me, as a big deal as it is to many of us, this is secondary when compared to the people of Tigray that wanted peace, that wanted to go back to their homes, and the opposite of it was, if you don't accept this, you continue the war. And I told you as before, we wanted to silence the guns at this level. And therefore, we are going to see to it this is genuinely implemented. It is a matter of give and take. It is not something that is not non-amendable. Of course, you need the understanding of the other party for the sake of peace, for the sake of continuity. And we have to wait and see what happens.
Ambassador, had the Tigray government sent official communication regarding the amendment clauses that it referred to in the statement that it issued a few days after the agreement?
Yes, it did. It has. In fact, in its press statement, it says we have already informed the relevant parties about our position for this to be considered. Yes, it did.
Okay. When the African Union-led peace talks were announced and quickly cancelled earlier before the Pretoria talks, the idea wasn't to have a genuine process, but instead to to give Ethiopia time to capture key cities, including Mekelle, and declare a fait accompli. How much trust do you have in the Ethiopian government now that it has signed the agreement?
Well, these are common words that people ask. How much do you trust after all this past 2 years? Trust is something that each party has to gain. Trust doesn't come because you signed an agreement. It has an element. You can start trust there, but trust comes when each party fulfills its share of the agreement. If it is flexible enough to allow the people live in peace, flexible enough for a constitution to be implemented in good faith, and therefore trust is something that each party have to gain. We have to do this. We have to implement the agreement in good faith. Trust comes after practically saying each party is doing its share as far as I'm concerned. There are those who say you don't trust the other party after 2 years of genocidal war. And there are those who say, well, what choice do you have other than to think the other party will do its share and then implement the agreement? So I think to me, it is good. There is no enough trust between the parties right now. We have to wait and see how the parties conduct themselves to create a trust, but we are doing our share to show the other party that we are serious about this agreement and that we are doing our work diligently.
One provision in the agreement is also the monitoring and verification mechanism, which, it doesn't leave everything to trust. So everything has to be monitored, verified, and checked that all sides are doing their share of their commitment. Tell us about the monitoring and verification mechanism in the implementation of the agreement. Is the 10-person monitoring and verification team staffed up? Is it constituted already? What is happening by way of pressing both sides to stick to their obligations and deadlines?
By the way, you're right. I think it was Reagan who said, trust but verify, meaning you can tell the other party, I trust you, but your insurance policy is verifying what is on the ground. Therefore, the main essence of this is the third parties. This is within the African Union framework. The latest information that I have is they have been constituted. These people have been identified, finalized all the credentials and protocol, but they are not yet deployed. We are waiting for their deployment at the ground.
What is taking the time? Because lives are being lost, and suffering, the pain is continuing as we speak.
I cannot tell you any justifiable things. It is the African Union. I'm sorry to say that, but that's how the African Union functions. But it's also, the mediators, the observers also believe that most of the things that we spoke earlier, the humanitarian delivery, the services that has to start, the basic services, the withdrawal of Eritrean troops, the withdrawal of the Amhara forces, the African Union mediators and others genuinely believe that we do not have to wait for the mediators, for the observers. They will just come and verify. Unfortunately, they are not there, which I think would have created additional pressure for these forces to withdraw from Ethiopia, from Tigray. But that is one of the excuses that I hear. You don't have to wait for the observers to do your part, which I also share. But in the absence of good faith, when these atrocities by Eritreans continue, that the deployment could have been done. much more earlier, and I hope they do it sooner than later.
Many observers have also expressed concern that this team of monitors made up of few people may not be up to the task, as given the complexity and the nature of the conflict and the actors involved. It requires a robust monitoring and verification mechanisms that we have seen in many peacekeeping sorry, but not peacekeeping, but observer missions.
I share their concern, and what I hope is, and there is also an understanding that these observers can always access the international community for support if they want to. As such, they are the official empowered observers, but there are a lot of technical support that they need. For example, they talk about satellite imaging, others, and therefore, if they were going to ask support from the United Nations system and even from countries from the United States, I hear these institutions are ready to support them. But I do share that, especially in the absence of what I consider, good faith on the part of those that are asked to redeploy, to withdraw, the mechanism, the monitoring group may need to seek support from other in the international community.
Yes, because calling on Eritrea to withdraw its forces will not deliver the desired results. You know, the Ethiopian government seems to be the junior partner in this coalition with Eritrea and may not have the necessary leverage to effect compliance of the Eritrean forces to withdraw from Tigray. What needs to happen to be done to prevent Eritrea from spoiling the peace process?
I do not want to speculate on what will happen. But I think the onus is on the government of Ethiopia, federal government of Ethiopia, for that to happen. For now, I wouldn't go beyond that. What if they do not withdraw? What's going to happen? Our military commanders are today meeting with their counterparts in the Ethiopian federal government side. In Shire, I understand that will be one of the issues they're going to discuss, if not the number one issue. And therefore, generally speaking, the disarmament issue, the disarming of our forces, is contingent to the withdrawal of the Amhara and the Eritrean forces. It talks about concurrently. So for the short answer is, we will not disarm until they withdraw. But that by itself is problematic because we wanted to stop the crimes they are committing. We want them out of our land. We want our people to be free. And therefore, it is not up to us to answer this question. The federal government has the responsibility. It has to ask them to withdraw. And if they cannot do it, I think they should tell the international community they have a problem with Eritrea refusing to withdraw. This is just a speculation on my part. For now, we are waiting for the government of Addis Ababa to do its responsibility.
The agreement seems to uphold the current Ethiopian constitution with the provisions of the signed agreement, which on the surface looks like a response to what the Tigrayans have been calling for all along. But hasn't the government been quoting the same document to wage the war on Tigray, the genocide on Tigray? It also seems that the government's claim to the rule of law and the constitutional order has been vindicated by the fact that the Tigray leadership has signed in Pretoria to disband itself, which should not have been done according to the constitution.
What has been done to the people of Tigray, the genocidal war that was waged against them, in my opinion, does not nullify that we use the constitution as a basis for solving what we have in Ethiopia. Therefore, yes, some say the constitution didn't defend Tigray. What else do we have to go about? Therefore, we wanted the constitution to make sure that we have our self-rule, self-administration. We wanted to use a constitution to have our territorial administrative region to be secured as it existed before this war. And also we wanted to discuss our political and other challenges, taking the constitution into account. Therefore, yes, I'm aware the constitution was there. It didn't defend us. Well, that happens when you have a government that does not respect its constitution. And yet you don't say we cannot use it anymore. That is what we have. And we will benefit from it. And we'll prove to the world and to Ethiopians that we have always been loyal to the constitution, and that the constitution was used against us, and this genocide has been committed to us. Therefore, we have larger challenges that didn't exist before, such as genocide committed in Tigray, and how do we rectify that? And therefore, yes, those questions are understandable, but we have to go by the constitution if we have going to be looking into our problems within the federal arrangement.
In his speech to the Ethiopian parliament, Abiy Ahmed made remarks that seem to indicate his alignment with the Amhara elitist claim and nomenclature, calling Western Tigray Wolkite, for instance, and also to allay their fears about likelihood of Western Tigray being returned to Tigray following the agreement. He said his government is not part of the conspiracy being talked about. He also advised them to do the work on the ground, which some have taken it to mean a clue to the Amhara to continue to cleanse Tigrayans and change the demography of the area in Western Tigray. Isn't such stoking of enmity between peoples prohibited by the Pretoria Agreement? Why is the Prime Minister saying such things?
I have no idea. You have to ask the Prime Minister, Michael. I'm not going to respond to that. But what I know is the constitution was put there as the basis, its principle, that Western Tigray will be back in its proper place. The same with the other claims that they have on Southern Tigray. And whatever happens after that, we have to wait and see. And therefore, there are many things that are said by the Prime Minister and others. I don't think I need to dwell on those. What I know is we have agreed in Pretoria. Our basis is the Ethiopian constitution. The parties, especially the other party, does not want to use the word status quo ante. Somehow it is considered as some poisonous word, but that's exactly what we're talking about. Constitutional framework means you cannot grab a place, people, and then say, this is ours. There is no basis for it. But there are other things that will follow that. People talk about the people of Western Tigray, Wolkite will have a referendum, what have you. Well, that the Ethiopian Constitutional Committee said. I know it's not a simple issue because that's all the Amhara extremists have to support Abiy. They tell us it belongs to them and that it is a red line. I think all of us has to come to some kind of sense, and these people have to change their mind that this is part of Tigray. But if the people of Wolkite and others have other ideas, we have to be accommodative for them to be heard. If they want to change their regional locality to the Amharas, they have entitled to do that. If they want to be on Tigray, they have entitled. We should leave it up to them. But the way you go there is not by grabbing, by displacing, by ethnic cleansing. It's a terrible precedent that you do this to the people and then you tell them you are ours. If we are talking about people, if we are talking about land with no people on it, that's another story. That the people of Wolkite and Sagade, Homora, have seen horrendous crimes committed against them. The 1.2 million people have been evicted from there. Some have gone to Sudan, others are in Inter Tigray, and I think we owe to them to go back to their places. And those people that are occupying their homes and farms shouldn't be allowed to do that. What do you stop if you do this in Wolkai? That will work in every part of Ethiopia. I'm not trying to undermine the challenges that we have on these areas. The people of Tigray and the people of the Amhara people need to work it out to live, to coexist peacefully. But the way they did it in these last 2 years is not the way to go about it.
And finally, accountability. Human Rights Watch released a statement recently in which it indicated that while the Pretoria Agreement calls for a transitional justice policy framework to ensure accountability, truth, reconciliation, and healing, it does not offer a clear roadmap on how to ensure this, like what was agreed by the South Sudan warring parties, hybrid courts to ensure both domestic and international jurisdiction. The concern here is that without proper accountability, there's fear that impunity and further abuses may prevail. Isn't this lacking isn't this key thing lacking in the agreement, because it confers on the Ethiopian government, which is a party to the conflict, in fact, a party that should be held accountable for the atrocities that were, verified by international human rights experts, and also the role of Eritrea, which was invited by the Ethiopian government, which is hindering, implementation of the agreement. And besides the non-cooperation, the track record of the Ethiopian government, the non-cooperation with human rights investigation teams, both the joint investigation and especially the current human rights experts.
I do personally share that the accountability issue in the agreement at face value is, in fact, what I consider the weakest link in that context, personally. If you just read the agreement, and it looks like it is saying accountability in passing, and also everything is going to be under the Ethiopian law, and also under the African Union transitional justice mechanism. There is much to be said about those. For example, the Ethiopian constitution and the penal codes of all the country is well elaborated. It can address those issues. It can deal with genocide, crime against humanity, what have you, as a legal document. The question is there going to be a political commitment by the current government, even if comes to it, to prosecute itself as a government? if in fact it is proven that genocide has been committed, which I genuinely believe genocide has been committed against the people of Tigray. Also, the African justice, transitional justice mechanism in the past has not yet dwelled on a criminal aspect of it. It is a matter of reconciliation, what have you. But what I understood is that there wasn't much you can say on that kind of agreement that is loaded with a lot of things, all the way from cessation of hostilities to political issues and all a kind of crunch in this document. And this accountability issue is one of the things that the international community ought to give enough attention. And there are precedents that it may not be limited to the national government, the Ethiopian government. It may not. Again, these are some of the things that you can find in literature. For example, the first thing that the government of Addis Ababa, the Ethiopian government, should do, and the international community should put enough pressure is, now that Tigray and Addis has made a peaceful agreement, the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia should be allowed and investigate the crimes committed by every party, the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, the Eritreans, the Tigrayans, everybody, the militias, and we have to see where that will lead. But a minimum, the investigation has to be done by this party. It is already on the process. The Human Rights Council has established this. They have presented their initial report after working for a couple of months. Now, once they have given enough access and they come with this full report, which, by the way, many countries in the world have also their own investigation. And the international commissioners, the experts can access all those. That is where it will lead you. Will they say the Human Rights Council will hear their reports and say, this is at such a level, it ought to be brought to an international tribunal? Will it be submitted to the Security Council? Or will it recommend to the African Union that this is above and beyond what the federal government of Ethiopia can do? You have to establish a tribunal, what have you. What I'm saying is, we all have to agree first, there has to be an independent investigation by the United Nations mechanism. I have asked myself that the negotiators in South Africa could have referred to this ongoing process. Like anything else, I think it will be discussed in the process. I have asked myself a simple reference. While it will be within the African mechanism, that the African mechanism will at least work for now with the commission that is working mandated by the United Nations. But this is one of the things that we have. If we are not committed to see that full investigation is done, and if we're going to allow impunity to continue, today it is against the Tigray people, tomorrow it will be against others. We all have to agree. We have to have a full-fledged investigation and a transparent mechanism of an independent nature that could prosecute those that are guilty. Because when we talk about this level of crime, you never know where the buck will stop. Will it stop at the defenses offices of both parties? Will it go all the way to government leaders? We don't know. Therefore, everybody has to be open for it and investigation has to be allowed. Even if the federal government says, I'm going 100% to own it, well, let them allow the international investigation. If you're going to go about, say, never impunity again, what have you. I think this is, as you said, a concern to many, including the international community. The agreement, of course, has put it clearly, and we can expand it from there.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Asgedom, for your perspectives and reflections.
My pleasure, Michael. You take care.
Well, we have come to the end of the interview. Thanks for watching.